change that myself.
All right, I hope everyone is seeing the live streamed banner. And while we're waiting to get this going, let me introduce Carrie Kerskie, who came to us via the Naples mug and gave such a potent talk to them that we just wanted to have that come to our Pi group. Carrie is an author and a very prominent speaker in the whole field of financial privacy and security. And this couldn't be a more potent time where we are all blundering into identity theft stuff, seemingly without even trying. With that, I would like to turn it over to Carrie. And Carrie, as we've talked about, we'll make you a co-host so you will be able to freely share your content.
Okay.
And then now I will spotlight you so that everyone will see you, and if someone coughs, it won't go to them. So anyway, welcome, Carrie Kerskie. We're delighted to have you.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. And again, I appreciate you all inviting me to speak with you today. So we're going to talk about protecting your assets from identity theft. So should you be concerned? That's a quarter right there. You can go online and buy anyone's information for 25 cents. That's because of basic supply and demand. If you look at all the data breaches we've had, especially last year alone, 1 billion records were exposed. That's a lot of information that's available for sale on the internet. So just like I said, supply and demand, the more you have of it, the lower the price is. It used to be, it would be $500, then $200. There's so much information, personal information available online. Your identity is now worth 25 cents. So people always tell me, well, I don't do anything online, or I'm really protected, or I don't give my social out. Genie's already out of the bottle. Think about in your lifetime, how many organizations have you had to share your sensitive information with? It's not a matter of you not giving it out now at this point. It's the fact that it's already out there. And all these companies have now moved to the digital age where everything is online and it is pretty much accessible. So yes, identity theft is something that everyone should be concerned about. Identity theft does not discriminate. It doesn't matter your age, your demographic. It doesn't matter your income. It doesn't care. Identity theft can happen to anyone at any time. We've seen it as young as a 2-year-old, and we've seen it as old as someone who is, I believe, 99. So it can happen to everyone at any point in time. So now that you all are thoroughly terrified, let's get into talking about what actually is identity theft. Well, most of you are familiar with bank accounts and credit cards. When you hear about identity theft, typically you think about financial, right? Because that's the one you hear about on the news, or anytime you read an article where it's talking about, it's all financial related. But identity theft is much more than that. We've seen identity theft involving utilities, primarily mobile phone accounts, where they'll do either SIM swapping. That's where they will call the phone carrier, pretend to be you, say, I have a new SIM card, transfer my service over. Now all your calls and text messages are going to the cell phone in the bad guy's hands. We've also seen porting, where they'll call the phone carrier, have them transfer your service over to another carrier. Now your phone doesn't work at all. Money laundering, we'll get to that one a little bit more, where we have a couple of cases that I'll share with you. Business identity theft, it's just like it sounds. Just like an individual has a social security number, businesses have a tax ID number. Businesses have a brand, they have an identity, they have a reputation. Bad guys love going after businesses, because if you're dealing with an individual, you might get, $5,000, $10,000 before somebody pays attention to it. With a business, you could do $50,000, $60,000 depending on the size of the business, and they might not even notice it due to the volume of activity. So business identity theft is another one. And here's the thing about business identity theft, especially, well, at least in the state of Florida. And I know this because that's where I'm from. And I know this is also a problem nationwide. Prior to 2015, business identity theft was not a crime in Florida. It wasn't until we worked with the legislators and we actually made it a crime. And this is a problem nationwide because a lot of the laws have not caught up with it. And when identity theft was first defined, it was based on an individual. So now more and more states are recognizing how big of a problem business identity theft is. Then you have criminal identity theft. That's when someone gets arrested, they present a driver's license or they have an identity and they pretend to be you. Now that goes on to your record. We had one gentleman years ago where he left his wallet on a gas pump and drove away, came back, wallet was gone. Fast forward to a few months later, law enforcement, they called him into the office and they said, hey, can you come down to the station? We've recovered your items. And he's like, great, they found my wallet. He went into the station and they questioned him for quite a lengthy amount of time. And he's like, why are they questioning me? You know, because they found my wallet, they should just be giving it to me. Well, they walked him into another room where there were stacks and stacks of bundled driver's license, all with his information. The only thing missing was a photograph. They were being mass produced to sell. As a matter of fact, you can go online and buy a driver's license with anyone's information, but your photograph. It's called a novelty ID. You can do a Google search. It's actually quite terrifying. They've been making these out of China for years. All the new security measures, the UV ink, the hologram, all of it they've been able to duplicate and master for years. So with criminal identity theft, it makes it real easy. When they get when somebody gets arrested, you know, it's your information that's presented. And you might think, well, what about when they fingerprint them? Not everyone has fingerprints on file. So criminal identity theft can be a huge problem. The gentleman who left his wallet on the gas pump, another reason they called him down was not just to show him all the bundles driver's license, but there was a warrant out for his arrest for the murder of 3 people. Someone who was involved in a murder investigation had presented himself to be this gentleman. So it can be a very serious problem. Medical identity theft, just like it sounds. Someone goes for some sort of medical, whether it's prescriptions or durable medical equipment or a doctor's appointment, and they present your identity. Well, this one is the deadliest form of identity theft because their symptoms, their test results, all their information now gets commingled with your medical record. When you go to a doctor, they're looking at your medical file. So when you go in and say, well, doctor, I have these symptoms, when they're looking to make a diagnosis, they're not basing it just on those symptoms that day. They're going back and looking what's in your file. We've seen multiple cases of misdiagnosis due to misinformation in a medical record because of medical identity theft. Then you have government benefits and documents. Again, we talked about the driver's license. When you think of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, any unemployment, any type of government benefit program, we've seen the bad guys exploit. Then you have child identity theft. It's just as it sounds. Criminals love children because they can use their identity for 18 years, roughly, before anyone's even made aware of it. So we worked with a gentleman who's 24 years old, tried to get his first apartment, was denied for bad credit. He never had credit except for one credit card. And we pulled his credit reports, and sure enough, someone had been using his identity since he was 2 years old. So for 22 years, someone had used his identity. That was one of the few cases in the more than 15 years that we've been doing this. We actually helped him get a new Social Security number. Other cases, it's not necessary and actually it causes more problems. But in this case, we had to because the bad guy was so entwined with his Social Security number, the victim's Social Security number, that the only way for him to start fresh was to get a new social. And then you have synthetic. This is the new version of identity theft where the bad guys, they will take someone's name, someone else's date of birth, someone else's Social Security number, or they'll even make up a name or date of birth and address and put it with a valid Social Security number. And they create a whole new persona, a whole new identity, a new person. So when the credit applications are filed and it's submitted to the credit bureaus will create a new file for that person. And they can have, we've seen synthetic identity theft. People end up with mortgages, all different types of things. And it's for a person that doesn't even exist. But sometimes because it's tied to the victim's Social Security number, eventually it comes back around. And then the victim is the one who is questioned, thinking that they had used a different name or their falsified different information. So synthetic identity theft is the latest and the greatest, if you will, form of identity theft. And we're seeing a lot of it because it's much harder to track, and it's much harder to monitor for, and it's much harder to recover from. So, like we said, identity theft, it's more than a financial threat. You see the picture of the lovely car here. We had a call from a client last year where they said they got a letter in the mail saying that they had just purchased a vehicle because the letter was for their new insurance policy, and it was for a vehicle that they didn't own. And they also started receiving information from the state, for the tag renewal and for paying or the excise tax and everything for the vehicle. Well, this person, they live 6 months out of the year in Israel. So they weren't even in the country at this time. So they couldn't have even purchased this vehicle. Once we got involved, we ended up contacting the dealership. And what happened is the imposter was able to purchase a vehicle in a completely different state without ever setting foot at the dealership. Everything was done via email, via text message, via VoIP. Nothing was done in person. They were able to buy a car, get a loan, get insurance, and have the vehicle delivered, all without setting foot on the dealership. Now, to make matters a little bit worse, so that's the financial part of it, is where they had the loan and, obviously the insurance. But the person who had this vehicle, whether they gave it to somebody else or sold it to somebody else, the person who was driving this vehicle, they ended up running numerous red lights. They ended up blasting through toll booths, not paying. So my client started getting all these bills in the mail for traffic citations, for red light violations, you name it, kept getting all these in the mail. So we ended up, the car was reported as a stolen car because we dealt with the dealership. They were actually able to apprehend the car. They were pulling them over, and they know the law enforcement saw that it was a reported stolen vehicle. Whatever happened to the criminal, who knows? Because usually we don't find that information out, and it's irrelevant when helping somebody recover from identity theft. Fast forward a year later, we found that there's another insurance policy out there for the same vehicle. So this one involved a little bit of the criminal identity theft, the financial identity theft. I mean, it's, as you can see, this is a big problem. Also the government benefits or government document type of identity theft. So what can you do? Now that everybody's thoroughly terrified, take a deep breath. Here's how you can protect yourself. First thing, block what you can. You can't prevent all identity theft from happening, but you can prevent certain types of identity theft, which we will get into. So block what you can. Make your identity difficult to use, so hopefully the bad guys move on to an easier target. Awareness. You need to keep abreast of all the current threats that are out there. Now, when I say all of them, it sounds overwhelming, but just keep your eyes and ears open to what's going on. What's the latest technology that they're using? For example, caller ID spoofing. That's been around for years, but most people are still unaware of it. Did you know that bad guys, they can make your caller ID say whatever they want. They can call you and make it actually look like you're calling yourself. So that's one tool that they'll use. And if you're not aware of that, you might be inclined to fall for a scam believing it's a call from your bank, because that's what it's displayed in your caller ID. So you need to keep aware of what the threats are and the technology and how it's being used against you. And then for everything else, for the type of identity theft that can't be prevented, or if something new should come around, you need to be able to mitigate it. You need to have a plan in place. Who are you going to call? What are you going to do? How are you going to recover? Because if you wait until something happens, the longer you delay taking action, the longer it's going to take to recover. So make sure you have prevent what you can. Be aware of everything else that's going on, and aware of, any unusual activity if you get an unusual activity in your bank account or your credit card statement, get an unusual letter in the mail. Don't just say, oh, it's probably no big deal. No, take time, check it out. And then for everything else, mitigate. So let's get into each one. Prevention. One of the biggest ones that we see is new account fraud. That is new account new credit account fraud. That's when someone uses your identity to take out a credit account. Could be a loan, it could be credit cards. We see a lot with the home equity line of credits, not as much now because of the way interest rates and everything are, that the banks are scrutinizing these. But back when interest rates were super low, the banks were pretty much handing these things out left and right. So we saw a lot of fraud involving those. But with new account fraud, it's one of the types of identity theft that can be prevented. Now, you might have heard put a fraud alert. Most people, if you do an internet search how to protect yourself from identity theft, the #1 response is put a fraud alert on your credit reports. Nope. Fraud alert doesn't really protect you 100% like you might think it will. What a fraud alert is, it's a disclaimer. It's a statement that goes on your credit report to warn a potential creditor that there is an increased risk of identity theft and that they are supposed to call you before they open the new account. Well, not all creditors pay attention to that. Not all creditors take the steps to actually call the person and confirm that it's them. And January of this year, first time we ever saw it, a bad guy put a fraud alert on a victim's credit report. So when the creditor pulled the credit report, the phone number listed in the fraud alert was the bad guy's. So a fraud alert is not the best protection against new credit account fraud. What is? The credit freeze. A credit freeze, it's mandated by federal law. It says that you are allowed to place a free credit freeze on your credit report. What that means is if somebody tries to use your identity to apply for, let's say, an American Express card, American Express is going to pull the credit report because they want to know what kind of payer you are, your credit history. Well, if you have a freeze, the only thing they see, file frozen due to consumer's request. They don't see the full report. If they can't see the report, they can't make a financial decision. Therefore, the account is never opened. So it's your best defense against new account fraud is a credit freeze. A credit freeze is free. Now, how do you activate it? Well, with a fraud alert, you call one bureau, they notify the other two. With a credit freeze, you have to place it with each credit bureau directly. If you only do it with one, you're leaving yourself wide open because not every creditor pulls reports from all 3 bureaus. So you need to make sure that you're doing it with all the credit bureaus. So what are the credit bureaus? There's 3 of them, right? Nope. There are actually 5 that we recommend. Actually, there are more than 50 consumer reporting agencies out there, at least the ones that we're aware of. But we recommend 5. You have Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Those are your big 3, the most well-known. You have Innovis, which is the 4th credit bureau. It's becoming more and more robust. And then NCTUE, which stands for National Consumer Telecom Utilities Exchange. This is where we see the activity for the mobile phone accounts. So if you're only freezing with the big 3 or 4, and they're trying to open a mobile phone account or to buy a mobile phone on a payment plan, if that phone carrier doesn't pull the credit report from the big 3 or 4, and it pulls from NCTUE, you're wide open. That's why we recommend putting a freeze with all 5 of them. I recommend doing it online. If you do it online, Experian, Equifax, Innovis, and TransUnion, they all allow you to set up a free online account where you can manage your freeze. You can log in and you can turn it on. You can log in and you can temporarily lift it because a freeze is permanent until you either temporarily lift it for a period of time, if you need somebody to see your report, or until you remove it completely. So once you set it, it's done. Remember the old Ron Popeil commercials, the set it and forget it? That's kind of like a credit freeze until you need it. You're going to see the QR code that's on here. You'll see it again at the end. If you take a picture of that, that'll take you where you just enter your name, your email address, and I will email you the web links for each of the 5 credit bureaus of how to set up the credit freeze. So if you miss it right now, moving to the next one, it'll be at the end. Credit lock. Do not do a credit lock. When you go to put the credit freeze on, the bureaus might try to convince you to upgrade, is what the terminology they use, to a credit lock. The big difference between a freeze and a lock, because the bureaus will tell you it's the same thing, or they'll tell you a lock is better because it's more convenient. A freeze, your rights are mandated by federal law. What the credit bureaus are required to do or not allowed to do is mandated by federal law with a freeze. With a credit lock, that's just a contractual agreement between you and the bureaus, and they can change that at any time. As a matter of fact, we had a client this year where normally we manage all this for our clients, and he had a personal assistant who was handling the credit freezes for him. We've received an alert about something. We contacted the personal assistant and said, "Are you aware of this?" They said, "No, we're not doing anything. How did this happen?" I said, "Well, I don't see your accounts, so I don't know." I said, "But go in and make sure you still have the freeze." He called me back. He said, "We have the freeze and the lock." I said, "Why do you have the lock?" He said, "Well, because I figured it was better protection having both." Told him, "You're going to have to call the credit bureau and find out what happened." He called the credit bureau and he was told, because they have the lock allows them to release the credit report to creditors that they have an agreement with. That kind of circumvents the whole purpose of having a freeze, right? By trying to lock your credit is to prevent somebody from getting access to it. So stick with the freeze, avoid the lock, don't do the lock, just freeze your credit. Okay, the next one we see is account takeover. So they're going to try to create new accounts, which you already talked about, and a way to protect yourself for new credit accounts. But what about your current accounts, like your bank accounts, your credit cards, everything else? Well, bad guys have been doing account takeovers for years, and the problem's actually getting worse. If you think about with all the data breaches we had, if you're someone who recycles your passwords, meaning use the same password for everything, well, if it gets breached from one company, the bad guys just take those list of usernames and passwords and point them to all the major financial institutions until something opens. So how do you protect yourself and your financial accounts from someone taking them over? Basic cyber security, cyber hygiene, digital prevention, whatever you want to call it. Here's some basic steps. First, use a strong password. That is a minimum of 12 characters. Now you might think, great, I have to do my password and put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, exclamation point, $sign after it. No. Here's an easy way to come up with it. Think of it as a passphrase instead of a password. So think of, let's see, for example, I live in Florida. So I could say always sunny in Florida, and then swap out some of the letters for numbers and characters. I could also say palm tree beaches. That's long enough, right? You can use 3 random words. You can use a saying from your favorite song, book, or movie. Another trick that I've used over the years is when my children were little and they were just learning how to talk, or when they were just first talking, they always would mispronounce words or say it in a little bit of a different way. I would use those because they weren't real words. And nobody knew how to spell it because it wasn't an actual word. So I just kind of made up my own spelling for it. But use a strong password. Do not recycle your passwords. And don't think by adding a 1 or a 2 or changing 2 or 3 things at the beginning or the end or swapping the order is a unique password. No. You need to make sure they are completely unique. Now, I know what you're thinking. This lady's crazy. I have hundreds of passwords. I'm not doing that with all my passwords. I agree. I'm with you on that. So here's a shortcut. All of your online accounts, break them down into tiers or buckets, if you will. Your tier 1, those are your crucial accounts. If somebody got into them, they're going to do some serious damage. That's your bank accounts, your credit cards, your investment accounts, your mobile phone account, because if they get a hold of your mobile phone number, then they can do the SIM swapping, or they can do the porting, which allows them to now receive your phone calls and text messages. And remember, 2-factor authentication, often a code is texted to your phone number. So that's why that's a tier 1. You need to protect those mobile phone online access accounts. So anything that is crucial, anything, work related or investment related, anything, if they got into it, they could do some serious damage. Those need to be a minimum of 12 characters, and they need to be completely unique. And change them once a year. Do it on your birthday. Set a reminder on your calendar. Once a year, go in and change those passwords. Now, your tier 3s, those are things like if you sign up for a newsletter, or if you buy something online, but you just one time, but you never store a credit card and you don't have any financial information stored in there, use whatever you want for the password, because if they get into it, Who cares? So what? What are they going to do with the information? I bought an NBA jersey for a relative a few years ago for their birthday, and I don't do anything with basketball. I know nothing about basketball. I'm not a basketball fan, so I knew I would never go to the website again. I checked out as a guest, did not store my credit card. I used a really bad short password. Who cares? All they're going to see is I bought a jersey. Okay. So your tier threes, don't put too much time and energy into those. Now your tier twos, those would be things like a Netflix or, something where maybe you have a credit card stored where they could get into and they could maybe do some stuff, but it would be a pretty simple fix. I mean, if your card gets exposed, you call your credit card company, they send you a new one. It's not that big of a deal. Yes, if you have auto payments tied to it, you'll have to change those, but it's not like somebody's taking, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars out of your bank account. It's a big difference there. So all your online accounts, tiers 1, 2, and 3. 1, crucial, unique passwords, minimum 12 characters. Those are the strongest ones. You change them on an annual basis. Tier 2s, they should be pretty strong. They should be pretty unique, but you don't have to put as much time and energy. Tier 3s, who cares? Use whatever you want. Use multi-factor authentication, which is when you log in, they'll either text you or email a code, or now many websites are moving towards a passkey using something like a Google Authenticator or Authy. I mean, there's all different ones out there. So I definitely would take advantage of these because it's all about layers. The more layers or barriers or hurdles, if you will, that you have to jump over in order to get into your online account, that's the same many steps or hurdles a bad guy's going to have to overcome to get into your account as well. So be careful of the privacy versus convenience. People sometimes sacrifice their privacy in lieu of convenience. Think of it as a scale. The more you have of one, the less you have of the other. So if it only takes you one step to get in, that's all it's going to take the bad guys, right? So make sure any extra security on the accounts, whether it's multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, passkeys, whatever, take advantage of it and use these tools. And finally, validate or eliminate. There are so many scams out there. I mean, we could spend an entire year on a Zoom call and still never get to every single scam that's out there, whether it's an email, a phone call, a text message, a letter, just websites. What do you find? Downloading. I mean, there's so many of them out there. So we like to keep things simple. Validate or eliminate. I don't care if it's an email, text message, phone call, whatever comes in front of you. If you can't validate or verify that information to be true without opening the attachments, without clicking a link, or without calling the phone number in the message, if you can't validate that information using another way, eliminate it, delete it, get rid of it. Okay. If it's that important, and if it is legitimate, the organization is going to find another way to contact you. So for example, if you got an email from Facebook saying that there was a password reset or password recovery code was initiated, first thing you might panic and write in the email message, it's going to say, if you didn't initiate this, click here. Well, some of them are real. They actually are from Facebook, but a lot of them are fake. If you clicked on that, if you didn't do this, click here, it takes you to a fake Facebook login page. Looks exactly like the Facebook login page. All they're doing is stealing your credentials. Now they're going to get in and take over your account. Same thing with banks. Same thing with any other investment type stuff. Any for online accounts. So when you get those emails, never click the links, never call the phone numbers, never open the attachments until you have confirmed that information is true. So how would you do that? Log into your Facebook account. Use your app or go right to facebook.com and log in. If you can log in, obviously the password wasn't changed. And sometimes you can go in and look at the profile settings, make sure nothing has changed there, make sure it's still your email, your phone number, your contact information. If it's something from Amazon regarding a supposed purchase, log into your Amazon account, go to the order history. If it was something from a bank about a suspicious transaction, log into your bank account, go to the transactions. Do you see it there? If not, call your bank. Now, here's another thing. Do not do an internet search for a phone number by just putting in, let's say, for example, Bank of America phone number. You're going to get phone numbers that pop up at the top, but that's in the ads. And those aren't always the real phone numbers. especially with Comcast. Comcast has changed so many phone numbers over the years that the bad guys buy up the old discarded phone numbers, and they still answer them as Comcast. And if you try to search that phone number on the internet, you are going to see that it was connected to Comcast. It doesn't tell you it no longer is. It just says at some time it was connected to Comcast. So when you need to look up a company's phone number online, go right to the organization's website and look at the contact information. Because if you just search for a Google phone number or Google's phone number, a phone number is going to pop up. Google does not have a phone number that you can call. You would be calling the bad guys. So that's another thing to be careful about. Okay. Threats evolve. You know, everything we talked about already, and techniques about how bad guys, you know, will manipulate. It used to be, you know, the phishing emails. It was obvious it was a phishing email. It would say, you know, dear customer. The grammar was poorly written. I mean, it was obvious that these were fake emails, and you know, you pretty much could just look at it and discard it. Today, there's AI. I was giving a presentation at a conference, and we were talking about the latest threats. So I just wanted to see what would use. So I went to one of the AIs, I think it was ChatGTP, and I just put in, give me a demonstration of a phishing email. That's all I wrote. And within seconds, it produced a beautifully written phishing email that if you would have received that email, you wouldn't have known it was fake. It was written better than any of the ones that I've actually seen come from legitimate companies. Now, granted, at the very top, before the phishing email, there was a disclaimer saying this is for demonstration purposes only and cannot be used to perpetrate fraud. Yeah, like bad guys pay attention to that. But the point is, AI is now making things so much easier for the criminals, and you need to be aware of this. You can't take anything at face value anymore. Voices are being manipulated. So the old, the grandparent scam where they'd call and be like, hey, grandma, this is, you know, Timmy, I'm in trouble. I need you to send me money. They would always hide the voice or say, I have a cold, or I broke my nose. That's why I sound funny. Now they just use AI, and it actually sounds like the grandchild. There are a lot of people getting scammed with that one. Videos, you're not going to be able to believe that anymore. A year, maybe 2 years ago on my podcast, there was a gentleman I interviewed. He does undercover work for the Department of Justice. And we were talking about money mules and all different types of you know, scams and how people get victimized and such. And he told me before we did the interview, because we recorded it through Zoom, and there was video, he said, the voice you hear and the face you see is not me because I do undercover work. Well, if he wouldn't have told me that, you wouldn't have known. And then partway through the interview, he just went online, randomly found a picture of me, switched it over, and it was now me talking to me. Now, the voice was still the one he was using, but the picture was me. And it was not the best picture. You know, he did it within like 2 seconds. So yeah, you could tell. But if he had longer, it would have been perfected. So just because you see it and hear it doesn't mean that it's real. Still validate, okay? Here's some other ways that they're evolving, or why you need to keep abreast of everything. So we talked about the fake Facebook password recovery email. You can get a fake text from the bank. You get a fake invoice. This is the big one. A lot of people are getting an invoice, whether it's from PayPal or it says it's from Norton. You know, for antivirus. Now you all are Apple users, so you obviously you don't have Norton. But you know, in case some of you have the hybrid environment, or maybe you still have some, you know, Windows laptop or whatnot. But this is getting a lot of people. And it's not always Norton, it could be for something else, but it's a fake invoice. And it says, here's your, attached is your receipt for the transaction. If you did not make this transaction, click here or call this number. Don't do it. You'd be calling the bad guys. We've seen people lose a significant amount of money due to this one. And also the fake virus pop-up, where you get the pop-up and it says there's a problem. On Apple, I've seen it where I've gone to a website and there'll be a pop-up saying that there is a problem or there's an issue. So I just close out the browser and, you know, take care of that, and you don't have to do anything else with it. But there are more and more of these coming out, and we are seeing more of these on Apple products and even using Safari. So just be careful. When something pops up, don't click on it, you know, take other action. So just to talk about how things are evolving, remote access software. This is software used by legitimate tech companies, IT companies, to be able to remotely repair someone's computer. If the printer doesn't work, you can remotely log into your computer and they can check it and they can do it. So they don't have to make a house call. Businesses use this so that the IT department can remotely, troubleshoot, fix issues, update security patches, whatnot. So these are all legitimate software programs. The bad guys are using them for fraud. We had 2 years ago, it was a couple. The wife was on the computer. She had a pop-up and it said a virus was detected. She thought it was her antivirus. She called the phone number. She ended up calling the bad guys, not realizing they were the bad guys. She thought it was her antivirus company. They had her install one of these remote access software programs onto her computer so they could troubleshoot the issue and get rid of the virus. And while they were doing this dog and pony show, having her put all this stuff in the C prompt and doing all these different things, over here on the screen, behind the scenes, they were taking information off the computer. But when everything was said and done, okay, ma'am, we fixed your computer. There are no more viruses. They're removed. You have our phone number. If there are any problems, just give us a call back. Otherwise, we think you're in good shape. They never asked for money. Never asked for bank account information, never asked for sensitive information. All the red flags of what you've heard numerous years, time and time again, to watch out for with phone scams or pop-up scams or whatever. None of those things happened in this case. Why not? Remote access software. The bad guys had them install this program on their computer. When the couple walked away from the computer or went to bed at night, because the remote access software was in there, they were able to fire up the computer, go right to the web browser. The couple kept their passwords in the web browser. I'm not a fan of that at all. And here's why. Because when the bad guys went to all the bookmarks or the hit browsing history, where most people would, you see the financial accounts and stuff because people periodically go in and check in them, or regularly, I should say. They went right to the bank. When they got to the website, the web browser said, would you like us to fill in the password? Because they were saved in the browser. The bad guy said, heck yeah, let's do it. Clicked on it. Now they were in the bank. They were in the bank account. They saw everything. A couple of days later, this couple, they get a call from their bank and it said, hey, did you guys try to do a wire transfer? No, that we didn't. Oh, well, we see one that's coming through here. Have you had any computer issues lately? Well, yeah, we just had a big issue in our antivirus company. We were on the phone with them for an hour and, they fixed the problem. Okay, well, that seems to be where it's coming from. Here's what we're going to do to protect your assets. We're going to move the money from your current bank accounts over to a separate bank account, like consider it like a holding account that the bad guy won't be able to access. So we're going to do that until we can figure out how they're still getting into your current bank account. So it's for your protection. Now, it's going to look like you're doing wire transfers. You're really not, but that's just how our internal process works. But this is the best way. And if you have any questions on this, here's my number. I'm in the fraud department. Now, we're not sure this might be an internal issue. So if you go to the branch or if you call the 800 number for the bank, they're not going to know anything about this because we're going to keep this in our fraud department only because there is a possibility it's an internal issue. That was a huge mistake. Because the couple believed it. A few days later, they get a call from the firm where they do have all their investments, their stocks, their bonds, their retirement accounts. Same thing. Did you try to do a transfer? No. Okay, we're going to protect your accounts. We're going to move them over. At the end of 30 days, they lost $500,000. This couple is in their 80s. They have $100,000 to live off of. They lost all of it. Because they were manipulated into doing wire transfers. Wire transfers, you have 24 to 48 hours to report it and stop it. Otherwise, the money's gone. Now, sometimes you can get lucky and the receiving bank is questioning it. And if they suspect fraud, they can hold before they release the funds to the bank account holder on the other side. But most of the time, after 48 hours, that money's gone. $500,000 in 30 days because of remote access software. When most people call us and they say, oh my gosh, we fell for a phone scam. I can't believe I did it. We ask them questions about, tell us exactly what happened on this phone call. We've seen Apple products, because they get this phone call and they're on their app, whether it's on their iPhone, their iPad, Mac, whatever. They have them install multiple programs. We have seen people 6 months after the initial phone call they received still have remote access software on there. And it's not unusual to have more than one remote access software program. The bad guys leave themselves a back door, because if you remove the one, they still want to be able to get in and get access. We also are seeing with the remote access software, they're having people install things like Coinbase, which is trading in cryptocurrency, and they're linking that to the victim's bank account and scheduling regular purchases of crypto or Bitcoin. So there's all different types they're doing, because basically with the remote access software, when they are in your device, it's like they're sitting right there next to you and it's in their hand and they're in control of it. They can do whatever they want from anywhere in the world and access anything that's on it. So you need to be very careful with this. If anybody says we need to check your computer or go to this website, give me this code, and you see things are starting to move around, immediately disconnect from the internet, because that severs the connection and it gives you time to mitigate the problem. So this is how it starts typically. Get a fake antivirus pop-up like this one. See right here, Mac virus warning. That's one a lot of people with Apple products have fallen for. There are a whole bunch of different versions of this. It'll be a phishing email that you could get that has you click on something like it says, thank you for your purchase. If you didn't do this, call this phone number. You call the phone number. They're going to tell you it was probably a tech issue or something else. Spam phone calls, text messages. You need to treat text messages just like you do emails, possible phishing. Never call the phone numbers, never click on the links and a text message until you have confirmed it to be true. So if you do get remote access software on your device or devices, because sometimes Apple products, you can sync them. So any app that's downloaded on one automatically gets downloaded on the other, especially between iPhones and iPads. So even though you were only using one, it now could be infecting the rest of your products. So how do you get rid of this? First, disconnect from the internet immediately. Shut down your Wi-Fi. Get off the internet, because that severs that connection and prevents them from doing any more damage. Once it's disconnected, it's not a virus. It is a legitimate software program. Will not and cannot be detected by antivirus, or a firewall will not stop it. It is a legitimate software program. To see if you have it, look at your installed apps. See what you have on there, or go through and usually if it was something that was most recently, it's usually on the home page or on the last page that you see when you're looking at your home screen and such. So if you see the apps on there, go through all of your apps. If you see one, you're like, I don't really remember this, or I don't know what this does. Take the name of the app and search it online. If it says remote access software, you need to get rid of it. How do you do that? Uninstall the program. Now for Apple products, especially iPhones, iPads, you know how to do this. You hold down on the icon until it does the little wiggle, the dance. You don't want to remove it from the home screen. You want to remove or delete the app altogether. If you only remove it from the home screen, it's still there and it's still doing its damage. You just don't see it on the icon on the home screen anymore. So make sure it is permanently and thoroughly removed. If you have the syncing set up through iCloud, make sure you check all of your devices, see if there was anything else on those as well. Or if you don't need to use the syncing, if you're just doing it kind of a convenience for every once in a while. For me, my iPad and iPhone are not synced. I do not have it where when something gets downloaded onto one device, like an app through the iCloud, it automatically goes on the others. I do not do that. And this is the purpose, the main reason why. I'm trying to prevent things from being multiple infections. And if in doubt, if you need to hire a professional, tell them to look for and remove remote access software. If you don't use those words, if you don't specifically instruct them to do that, they're just going to check your device for anything unusual, any type of bloat or spyware or that kind of stuff. They're not going to even question the remote access software because in their industry, they use it. They know it's a legitimate program. You have to tell them to remove it. And again, often more than one is installed. Now, you can't prevent all identity theft from happening, like we talked about earlier. This is a quick example, because as you can tell, we could talk about this forever. Doing this 15 years, we got a lot of victim stories, cases that we worked with. But this one just is the perfect example of why you can't prevent all identity theft. we get a call from a woman where she got a letter from a bank. I believe it was Wells Fargo, but we'll just use that as an example. And it said, we are suspending your account due to suspicious activity. She almost threw the letter away because she doesn't bank there. She doesn't have any accounts there. She thought, oh, this is just a scam letter. But something made her actually take action. She tried calling them, couldn't get a hold of anybody online. And this was pre-COVID. So she ended up going down to the branch. And when she was in the branch, she said, I got this letter, but I don't bank with you guys. What is this? The person looked it up. Sure enough, there was a checking account and a savings account. And they were both fully funded. Someone had put $30,000 into each one of these accounts. And then they began moving large sums of money out to various other accounts, which is what triggered the letter. All financial institutions, banks, are required by law for anti-money laundering regulation. If they see any suspicious activity of money laundering, they are required to notify the IRS and the FBI. And they also put that account on what's called a SAR report, suspicious activity report, and it gets flagged within the banking industry. That's what happened to her. Now, when she first was at the bank said, oh, well, this is fraud. Okay, so we're closing down this account. And they gave her a check for $10,000. She's like, that's not my money. They're like, well, we can't keep it. We have to give it to you because your name's on it. So obviously we told her, don't cash the check, don't do anything with it. But while she was in the bank, fortunately, the person at the branch, they gave her printouts of the statements of the transactions for each of the accounts. So we knew where the money was transferred to. We ended up contacting those companies. It was like one of those mythological stories where you cut off the head of the serpent and like 4 more heads pops up. This is exactly what this was. So it started with the Wells Fargo. We looked at the statement. It went to like 5 different accounts. From those 5 accounts, it went to like 5 more for each. By the time we were done, there were tons of accounts, all opened with her identity, and all were used for the purpose of money laundering. During COVID, this increased exponentially because the traditional businesses bad guys would use for money laundering, the cash sort of businesses, those were shut down. They had to get creative. So they just started using victims' identities and use money laundering online. Money laundering, or this type of identity theft, because it was involving bank accounts, not credit accounts, bank accounts. A credit freeze doesn't prevent it. Credit monitoring will not detect it because it's bank accounts. Okay. For those types of things, the only way you'd find out is if you're like this woman and you get a letter from a bank saying that they suspended your account, or if you get a letter from a bank saying, hey, thanks for opening your account. Or if you get a debit card in the mail for your brand new account, which you did not open. Don't think those are scams. Don't think they're errors. Don't dismiss them. You need to take action right away because you could be a victim of money laundering identity theft. So when things like that happen, what would you do? Who are you going to call? You need to be prepared. You need to have a plan in place. When you call them, so if you know who you're going to call, if you decide you're going to do it yourself, when you're calling these banks, what do you say? What do you ask? What questions do you need to know? If this one would have just gone to the bank and they would have closed out the account and she never got those statements, we never would have known about all the other accounts and this would have just continued. And who's going to advocate for you? These companies, when I say these companies, I mean all the legitimate companies, the financial institutions, the credit bureaus, all these things, they know that victims don't know what their rights are. And unfortunately, sometimes they take advantage of the situation. It's not unusual for them to say, for example, multiple times people will call me and they'll say, I've been trying to fix my identity, this issue for 6 months, and I keep sending the same forms. They keep asking for the same form. I keep sending it. We're going round and round. Nothing's being resolved. I don't get it. Well, the company was asking for an identity theft report that consists of a police report plus an identity theft affidavit from the Federal Trade Commission. But the company never bothered to tell the victim that. They just said, we need the identity theft report. They kept sending the police report, but they didn't have the affidavit. So I said, just go online, do the affidavit, submit it in, and the problem should be resolved. If not, give me a call back and we'll help you. Called me back 2 weeks later. They're like, that's what it was. Problem's fixed. So these companies, whether it's they don't know what your rights are, or they know and they don't want to share them with you because the longer they can prolong it, the less chance they're going to lose that money and they can put it back onto you. So you need to make sure you have an advocate in your corner. But beware of well-meaning professionals and creative marketing. We see this all the time. We had someone contact us and they're like, I'm a victim of identity theft. You have to help me. You know, this happened 7 years ago. And I said, okay, well, tell me what happened. All these, mortgages and all types of things were opened using financial things, credit related things, opened using the person's identity. And I said, okay, well, what have you done since then? Well, I went to my attorney and they had me file bankruptcy. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. You already filed bankruptcy. Filing bankruptcy is admitting a guilt to all that debt that was never yours in the first place. Okay. Also, there are laws in place to protect identity theft victims from financial liability. We had another one where a victim, they had a savings account, which they called their savings quasi, retirement account, where they put money in and they never bothered looking at it because they figured out of sight, out of mind. If they looked at it, they'd be tempted to spend it. So they just didn't even want to look at it. They would just let it sit there, let it grow. We'll deal with it later. All of a sudden, they kept getting these letters in the mail from the bank regarding the retirement account. And they're like, well, that's unusual. We don't usually get this much. So they opened up the letter. Insufficient funds. The account had not just a zero balance, but a negative balance. What happened is somebody got into that and slowly started taking increments of money and moving it out to other accounts until it was a zero balance. And that triggered all these alerts. So when this couple first found out, first thing they did, ran to hire an attorney. The law firm then, of course, took their money and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send demand letters to the bank. We're going to do all this stuff, la, 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 la. And in the end, they ended up getting some of their money back. But here's the thing that they didn't know. The bank was required by law to give them that money back, regardless of if they had a law firm or not. It's part of the federal regulation, the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. The attorney, not being aware of the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, because I had them send me the letter that their attorney drafted to the bank. And it was obvious reading this letter that they've never heard of that law before, because the demands they put in this letter were so ridiculous that I'm sure when the bank got it, they're like, yeah, whatever, we're just going to do what we're going to do. And they did what they were going to do. So the moral of the story is, whoever you decide to help you with this, ask them how many years they've been working with identity theft case victims, how many cases, and what's their success rate. Okay. If it's somebody who, and again, just everyone thinks that attorneys know how to do everything involving law. It's like going to a veterinarian where you need, when you need a dentist or when you need a cardiologist. It's a different type of doctor. They specialize. That's the same thing with law firms. Then there are also all these firms out there that tell you, the identity theft protection industry as a whole, the name of it, identity protection or identity prevention. There's nothing out there that will protect or prevent you. And then they say $1 million guarantees or $1 million insurance policies. Read the fine print. That's not your insurance policy. That is their master policy that in certain situations you may be able to take advantage of, but only after jumping through numerous hoops. Okay. Most of the victims who come to us, they have one of those services. And I ask them, like, why are you calling me? You have that service. They should be fixing it for you. The responses we're told, they can't, they won't, or they don't know how. Because most of those are just minimum wage call center workers reading off a teleprompter. We've even had people come to us that when they called one of those services that they've been paying for years, the so-called identity theft restoration specialist or a resolution specialist, if you will, told them that what happened to them was not identity theft because it didn't fit into the nice, neat little box of what they like to repair, which is primarily credit-related identity theft. Well, I already told you, you can stop that with a free credit freeze. Okay. So make sure you have somebody in your corner who's going to help you, but make sure they know what they're doing. And there are plenty of them out there. Just ask a lot of questions. And also, what level of service do you want? Do you want a call center where every time you call, you're talking to somebody who's completely different and you have to start all over again, explaining your story? I had an issue with one of the software programs that we use. It's a personal one. So I had to call their customer service. Oh my gosh, it was like pulling teeth. I was on the phone for over an hour, kept transferring me, still never got the problem resolved. Or do you want a dedicated professional, someone you can work with one-on-one, where they know exactly what the problem is, and then they're going to fight on your behalf to get the problem resolved? So again, these are things before you spend your hard-earned money buying one of these services. Make sure you know what you're getting. What do they cover? What don't they cover? Are there any, exclusions? Are there any deductibles? What do they do if something, and they might say, well, we'll monitor the dark web for you. So what? I can tell you your information is already out there. That was free. You didn't have to pay me for that. Okay. Dark web monitoring is nothing more than a marketing gimmick to get you to, it's fear marketing to get you to pay for some service. That's all that is. So if they tell you we do all these types of monitoring, great. All monitoring does is tell you there's a problem. What happens next? What do they do to fix it? That's the important question to ask. So again, protecting your assets, supposed to be assets, I do apologize, from identity theft. First is prevention. Block what you can, like we talked about, using the good cyber hygiene, the strong passwords, two-factor authentication, make it so it's multiple steps to access your crucial accounts. So the bad guys have to have that. Put a credit freeze in place. It's free. You can set up the online accounts to manage it. Awareness. Find somewhere. There are tons of places online, just like you guys are part of your Pi group, where you go to discuss everything and anything Apple related. There are tons of them out there. There's YouTubes, there's blogs, there's podcasts. Find somewhere where you know the person, you like the person, you trust the person. The information they're giving you found to be valid and it makes sense. Sign up for it, pay attention to it. That way you don't have to go out and spend hours, scouring and trying to figure out what the latest is. That way you could have somebody you can go to, but keep aware of what's going on out there. You don't have to know it inside and out and understand all the technology. Just have a general idea. So when something comes in front of you, you can be like, wait a minute, I think this is one of these things, or here's what I think they could do with this. Okay. And for everything else, have a plan in place. Who are you going to call? What you going to do? What you going to say? Here's my contact information. If anybody has any questions, there's that QR code again. If you take a picture of it, we will email you the information of how to establish the credit freeze with all 5 of the bureaus. You will also be opting in for our newsletter. We do not spam. There's no ads, nothing like that. Once a month, we send an email out that talks about, here's the latest threat. Here's what you need to watch out for. Here's how to protect yourself. It is informational, educational, because our whole purpose is to keep people informed, because the better informed you are, the less chance you're going to have of becoming the next victim. So Jonathan, I see there's some stuff in chat. Do we have any questions? Are we ready for the Q&A?
Yes. Thanks so much, Carrie. Let me, one thing that you could do is put all that in the chat.
Okay.
That's on your contact card, because we distribute the chat after the meeting, and so it'll be more widely available.
Okay, perfect. We'll do that.
And now I'll say goodbye to the YouTube watchers as we move on to other topics.